It has been 35 years since Iraq invaded Iran, starting what has been called the longest conventional war of the 20th century. Both sides lost a lot of people in the conflict, but they fought for different reasons, and two veterans had quite different perspectives on the events that transpired between them. Exactly how many troops do you think go into war with a grin on their face? Just how many people out of the estimated 1 million killed retain good recollections of that war? The theological disparities between the Sunni Muslim Iraqi government and the predominantly Shiite Muslim Iraqi public and the Shiite religious government of Iran have been a major source of tension between Iraq and Iran for many years. A dispute over who owns the canal of the Shatt al-Arab has exacerbated the problem. This river serves as the southern border between Iraq and Iran when it joins the Tigris and the Euphrates. Iran claimed the river's eastern bank was their territory, while Iraq said the river's western bank was theirs. Also, from 1961 until 1975, Iran supported Kurdish separatists who fought in northern Iraq, draining the country of its resources. Iran discontinued its backing for the Kurds in Iraq, recognized Iranian claims to the Shatt River in 1975. Despite the benefits to Iraq, the country's leaders viewed the deal as a loss. By the end of October 1980, Iraqi forces had captured Iran's largest port of Khorramshahr and were threatening the Iranian oil capital of Abadan and the regional capital of Khuzestan after Saddam Hussein announced on September 17 that he was ending the treaty with Iran that had been agreed upon in 1975. At first glance, the battle appeared to be a foregone conclusion, with the more technologically sophisticated Iraqis cruising to victory. However, it soon became apparent that the Iraqi forces were ill-led and lacked morale, while the Iranians were ready to put up a fierce fight. In the spring and summer of 1981, the Iranians counterattacked after Abadan and Khorramshahr withstood intense pounding from the Iraqis. This reversal was attributed by official Iraqi sources on long communication links and inexperienced regular and reserve forces. An additional rationale offered was that the Iranian infantry's surprise nighttime onslaught put the mechanized Iraqis at a disadvantage. As major attacks by Iranian troops were driven back at considerable cost to both sides, the battle dragged on and became increasingly deadly. When the Iraqi army was pushed back to the border in May 1982, Iran gained the upper hand thanks to a huge onslaught. In 1984, the Iranians were able to enter into Kurdistan and advance toward the Tigris River after another series of offensives. Majnoon Island in southern Iraq is the center of oil production in a swampy region that has historically been difficult to maneuver soldiers into, but the Iranians have now conquered it. During this time period of the conflict, the Iraqis utilized poison gas to ward off Iranian attacks. Both mustard gas and the more advanced nerve gas were used, proving that Iraq has the capability to produce and deploy such weapons of mass destruction. Iran took control of the Fa Peninsula in 1986 when its troops marched through the swampy area near the mouth of the Shatt al-Arab. In 1987, the Iranians nearly conquered Basra, the second largest city in Iraq. Much of the city's population was driven out by the onslaught, and it was severely damaged by artillery fire. In spite of this, Iraqi resistance held, and the war eventually settled into this pattern of Iranian offensives met by Iraqi defense. Many thousands of young Iranians volunteered to fight and die in this attrition battle, which was reminiscent of the First World War due to the value of martyrdom in Shiism. Iranian volunteers would charge headfirst into the fray in a suicide attack, clearing the way for regular Iranian troops to charge the Iraqi trenches and fortifications. Cities were bombed and attacked with missiles, making this a total war. In 1984, Iraq began bombing Iranian cities, starting with Disful and moving on to Tehran and others, despite the fact that neither side possessed enough bombers to cause any damage. In 1987, the Iraqis fired their first missiles at civilians. They were CUDs from Iraq that had been upgraded to fly farther and hit Tehran. The city's population was halved as a result of the exodus, which some estimates put at 4 million people. In retaliation, Iran launched missiles at Baghdad. Iran launched its last big attack in the spring of 1988, When its troops made a breakthrough in Kurdistan and came within striking distance of the Dukin hydroelectric plant, they ended up occupying 400 square kilometers of Iraq. Iraq, trapped and on the brink of defeat, released a toxic gas into the air to force the retreat of the Iranian army. At least 100 civilians were killed in the March 1988 use of poison gas by Iraqi forces against the Kurdish village of Halabja, which was occupied by Iran at the time. Iran claimed that 2,000 people had been killed. Iraq was able to stop the onslaught with chemical weapons and send its troops to a surprise offensive in the south, where they were instrumental in retaking the Fa Peninsula and pushing the Iranians back across the Shat. The tide had turned, and the Iranian force began to be pushed back, allowing the Iraqis to reclaim nearly all of the territory they had lost. The National Liberation Group, NLA, an armed rebel army in Iraq made up of exiled Iranians, attacked the Iranians via Kurdistan, making a poor situation even worse. The tide had turned, and Iraq was portraying itself as a secular contemporary state at war with religious extremists. After a period of tenseness, relations with other Arab states began to improve, and diplomacy and perhaps arms supplies with the United States were resumed. The Americans undoubtedly let European arms traffickers like the French into Iraq, despite Iran's continued arms embargo. European countries donated weapons, and moderate Arab states, afraid of Islamic fanaticism, provided funding for Iraq's war effort. Iran's soldiers were getting tired of the war after battling in Iraq's rugged terrain for most of the conflict. The Iraqi advances pushed Iran over the edge, and on 18 July 1988, Tehran announced it would accept the UN-suggested ceasefire, which went into effect on 20 August 1988. It is impossible to confirm the exact number of casualties. However, it is believed that between 1980 and 1988, Iran lost over 500,000 people to the conflict, while Iraq lost around 150,000 people in addition to sustaining 500,000 injuries and losing 70,000 prisoners. Iran, with a population of about 50 million compared to Iraq's 18 million, could afford the heavier casualties. Despite its victory, Iraq was unable to reap any benefits because the Shat al-Arab was rendered useless due to sediment buildup, and its $80 billion in foreign debt was not forgiven by Arab governments like Kuwait. Since the Iraqi people had already suffered through years of violent conflict, they saw the invasion of Kuwait, which led to the Gulf War, as their sole option for canceling this debt. In sum, the grim and skewed picture of pan-Islamism that emerged after the Iran-Iraq War of 1980 to 1988 is well known. Both sides fought fiercely for over 8 years before declaring a ceasefire. Did you like this video? Then the next video is for you.